So please, stay seated while the trolley's running, because we don't want any of our guests to go rolling in the aisle. Unless, of course, you think my jokes are that good, but I got to warn you up front, they're pretty bad. So, where does Milton Hershey's story start? In the small farmhouse on the south side of town, and we'll see it later. He was born there September 13th, 1857. Now, his family ancestry was a really long line of Swiss German Mennonite farmers. His mother's name was Veronica Buckwalter Snavely Hershey. Yeah, that's a long name. Everybody just called her Fanny. Nobody knows why anymore. So, I like to tell people I don't know the story behind that. First of the bad jokes. His father's name was Henry Hershey. He had a sister named Serena, and she died at the age of 4 of what we think was scarlet fever. Fanny had a really strong work ethic, and Milton inherited that. But he also got some traits from his father. He was a dreamer, an idea guy. Well, he liked to invent things, and some of his ideas were pretty good, but none of them ever made any money for the family. Plus, he liked to travel a lot. He'd be away from home for long periods of time, and it did not work out well for the family farm. They sold it when Milton was very young, and it drew his childhood into so much chaos. He was known to have attended at least 7 different schools by the time he turned 14. Yet he never got more than a 4th grade education. But when he was 15, his mother got him an apprenticeship at a candy maker in Lancaster, that's southeast of here. He loved that job. Finished when he was 19, and he started his own candy business in Philadelphia, because the year was 1876, the 100th anniversary of the birth of the country. For that first year, while the centennial was going on, business was great. But when the party was over and everybody had gone home, he learned 3 things real quick. Business slowed down, times got really tough, and the price of sugar was so high, it gobbled up all of his profits, and after 6 years of hard work, he went bankrupt. His father contacted him. Henry was out in Colorado. He contacts Milton, and he says, "Come on out, everybody's getting rich." So he worked in the mining industry for a while, but that didn't, anybody? Pan out, yes. He went to work for another candy maker in Denver, and there he learned a secret that played out real important later. The guy he was working for was making caramels that tasted better than anybody else, and the secret was in his recipe. He was using fresh milk. Nobody else was doing that at the time, so when he took it to mine, saved up enough money to start a new business in Chicago. But he learned right away Chicago had the same problems Philly had, especially with the price of sugar, and he almost ran out of money there. But before he did, he moved down to New Orleans, hoping the price of sugar might be cheaper where they grow sugar cane. It didn't work out that way down there either. So he rethought his business plan, and he moved to New York City, hoping if he could make it there, he could make it anywhere. Right. But New York had the same problems the whole rest of the country had, and after just 2 years of hard work there, bankrupt for a second time. Took the only money he had left, used all of it to buy a one-way ticket on the train back home to Lancaster. And when he got off that train, he didn't have a penny in his pocket. All of his relatives that had tried to help him out over the years, they had all written him off as a lost cause. He's now 29 years old, failed 4 times already, and there was nothing left to show for it. But there was one relative that still believed in him, his Aunt Mattie. Mattie was Fanny's sister. She always liked Milton. And when he said he wanted to start another business right there in Lancaster, she decided to help him. And she did the only way she could. She mortgaged her house and gave him all the money. Yeah, that's a terrible idea. Pretty soon it looked like one, too. He started the Lancaster Caramel Company. But it wasn't long before the bank started to threaten to foreclose on Aunt Mattie's house. Well, right about then, a traveling candy merchant from England showed up in town. Milton introduced him to his caramels, and wow, he really liked them. He liked them so much he wanted to place an enormous bulk order, ship it all back to England, and make a profit on it. Milton realized if he could fill that order, he could save Aunt Mattie's house. But he had a problem. He didn't have the equipment, not even the manpower to fill such an enormous order. So he did the only thing he could do. He went down to the Lancaster National Bank, hoping he might be able to get a loan. Well, when he went in, he was greeted by a junior loan officer by the name of Frank Brenneman. Now, Frank was fully aware of the situation on Aunt Mattie's house. But when Milton told him he had an opportunity he could pay everything off, Frank was intrigued. So he went down to the, let's call it a caramel factory. And when he went in, he saw Aunt Mattie and Fanny Hershey, and they were hand-wrapping caramels alone in a dirt floor warehouse. He shook his head the whole way back to the bank, knowing full well nobody in his bank would ever want to loan Milton Hershey any more money. But there was something about him he really liked. And Frank actually wrote him a loan. And to make sure that loan would make it through his senior management, Frank co-signed that loan himself. He put his own name and reputation on the line. Milton took the money, bought a whole bunch of equipment, hired a staff, they made the caramels, they crated them up and they put them on a ship bound for England. But it took a long time to get across the North Atlantic back in those days, and he still had one more big problem. He wasn't going to get paid unless those caramels arrived there in good condition. So there he was, the wolf was at Aunt Mattie's door, and he's waiting for a letter to come back from England because his entire future, not to mention Aunt Mattie's house, hinged upon what was going to be in that letter. The other 3 million pounds of candy come out of this plant every day, and that's roughly equivalent to the combined weight of about 230 full-grown African elephants. Whoops, that's a lot of candy. We'll get back to the story. Milton's waiting for a letter to come back from England, right? Only 10 days before the sheriff was actually scheduled to show up at Aunt Mattie's door with a foreclosure notice, a letter finally arrives. He opens it apprehensively and goes, everything arrived in great condition, and there was a check enclosed paid in full. He was so excited, he ran the entire way back to the bank, waving that check over his head as he went. Later on, when he would tell the story, he said he was so excited it wasn't until he got to the bank that he finally realized he had forgotten to take off his dirty work apron. Pushed him over the top, he saved Aunt Mattie's house, and he had a ton of money left over. He actually went back and tracked down all of his creditors from both bankruptcies, and he paid them all off, much to their surprise. One of the guys actually refused to take the money from him. It was on a religious principle because the debt happened to be more than 7 years old. So he gave the money to the man's sons instead. But there was more to it than money. Now he had equipment. He could do bulk orders. His caramels, well, they had gained an international reputation, so he went into distribution. In less than 4 years, he went from being almost penniless, becoming one of the richest men in Lancaster. Now, when he got on the trolley, you probably thought I was going to tell you some story about how he got rich making chocolate. When the fact of the matter is, his first fortune was actually made making caramels. So this is the point in our timeline we like to refer to as BC. Before chocolate. Good, you're with the program. Chocolate was a rich man's candy in the 1880s. It was made mostly in Europe. Well, he traveled there, and he saw chocolate, and he liked it. But he also saw something he found to be very interesting. He noticed some of those companies that were buying his caramels, they were coating them with chocolate because they sold better. And he remembered that. Well, he returned to the States and he visited the Great Columbian Exhibition in Chicago in 1893. It was an enormous World's Fair. He visited all the country's displays, checking out new inventions and fancy machinery, and in the Germany display he spotted something he really liked. German chocolate production machines. Well, he liked them so much, he bought the entire display when the fair shut down, just so he could get his hands on those machines. He crated them up, sent them back to his factory in Lancaster, and in the corner of the caramel plant, he created for the first time in 1894 the Hershey Chocolate Company. But he was still making European style, dark, very expensive chocolate. And he didn't like the fact not everybody got to try it because it just cost too much. So he gave it a lot of thought. He came up with a plan. This is the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup Factory. Yeah, we make 25 million peanut butter cups there every day. We also make Kit Kat bars. You add the 2 million from this plant to the 3 from the other, well, that's 5 million pounds of candy from a town of only 20,000 people. For that reason alone, Hershey has got to be the sweetest place on earth. Now, I'll get back to the story in just a little bit, but first, I'd like to tell you something happened in the 1960s.
Okay.
The chairman of the Hershey Trust Fund called the president of Penn State University. They were pretty good friends. And he said, you know, Penn State should have its own school of medicine, its own medical center. Well, he agreed with him. That's a great idea, but he reminded him they didn't have that kind of money. So he asked him, how much money do you think it might take? He said, you gotta be kidding. At least $50 million. And the chairman's response was, well, I think we can come up with that. It's less than a year old. It makes chocolate paste and then sends it to the other plants to address the ever-growing demand for chocolate. You look to your left, well, we've got to get past a tree or two here. Against the hill over there, you see a large building with a lot of windows on it. That's the Milton S. Hershey Medical Center and the Penn State School of Medicine. That's just the start of it, because we now have dozens of additional health care, research facilities scattered all over South Central Pennsylvania. It has a wonderful world-class children's hospital, and I'll try to answer just about anything. If I don't know the answer, I'll try to make up something that sounds plausible. These that makes up the Hershey Entertainment. That includes Hershey Park, our Hershey hockey team, Hotel Hershey, we'll see that later, and all those big concerts that come to town year-round. He's been able to buy back the old family homestead farm. And in the barn behind the house, he built a laboratory where he spent 2.5 years trying to come up with a recipe for good tasting and affordable chocolate. He finally succeeded by using the little secret he learned in Denver. He put fresh milk in his chocolate recipe and came up with that flavor we're all familiar with today, Hershey's milk chocolate. He went back to his factory. He fired up those German machines and started making Hershey bars for the first time in 1900, and they became wildly popular. They sold for $0.05 a piece all the way up until 1968. But right after the Hershey bar, he came up with the Hershey Kiss. Those are the classic milk chocolate kisses. Let's try some chocolate-covered caramels. I'll send them down that side. Section of Chocolate Avenue and Cocoa Avenue, of course, is going to be our town square. You might have actually seen our town square on network television on several occasions on New Year's Eve. Because when they're showing you the ball drop in New York City, we throw a pretty big party downtown ourselves, and at the stroke of midnight, we raise a 400-pound kiss. Oh. Yeah, we have to raise it, because if you drop it into a crowd, we're a little afraid it might get rushed. It's a waste of time. It's made out of aluminum. But everybody has a great time, and if you happen to be in South Central Pennsylvania during the holiday season, you now have an open invitation to come to our party. It's kind of like going to Times Square, but without all the profits of a big city. The municipality of Derry Township. When the town was built inside the township, in 1900, the Postal Service said, what's the name of the post office going to be? Well, a contest was created. The winning name was Hershey Cocoa, spelled K-O-K-O at the end, but the Postal Service said it was too commercial a name, and you can't advertise a postmark. So they shortened it to Hershey. So all the way up until 1989, the kids used to live on dairy farms. We don't have those farms anymore. The cocoa bushes on your right, they were planted in 1908. They're barberry bushes. They take good care of them. We put twinkle lights on them for the holidays, but then they become a bit of a traffic hazard after dark. Everybody wants to stop at the curb here and take pictures of them. Oh, that's right, this is the weekend. We get to go behind the old factory. During the week, we go straight up the street. But now I get to show you how big the factory really was. It went from this corner almost up to the next traffic light. It covered the soccer field, the basketball courts, all the parking lots, and it was taller than the yellow cocoa bean silos. 93 billion pounds were stored there, and we will never know how many kisses and candy bars came out of that old factory. But we do know how many candy bars were produced here in the 1940s, because the military kept great records. almost 4 billion candy bars. We still get veterans who want to know, why did that darn tea ration have to taste so bad? And we tell them because the military said so. It was in the contract. They weren't allowed to taste any better than a boiled potato. For good reason. They were heavily fortified with vitamins and minerals. They didn't want it to be the first thing they ate. When we ripped the bag open, they hoped they would hang around for a while, give them an extra push later on. That little 4-ounce candy bar is about that big, packed over 600 calories of energy. Here, just a couple of years ago, when a local black bear climbed the fence and broke into our zoo. It got a little weird there for a while, and then somebody said, "Hey, I think we have an extra bear." They took them away. Let's see if we can spot the wolves today. There's two dark ones and a blonde one. They live on the left side of the creek if you look to your right. But they're pretty sneaky. They like to show off down where the people are, but let's see if anybody's out today. No, they're down at the other end again today. A couple of years ago, I was walking the family dog across this bridge when the town's fire siren went off. The wolves started howling. Yeah, my 100-pound retriever, that dog seriously tried to drag me the entire length of this sidewalk. September of that year, a special ceremony was held here to mark the end of World War II. When the service was over, Milton walked out the front door with a good friend of his. The two of them strolled out onto this front lawn, had a long conversation as they looked down at the town and down at his factory. And there was only a couple of weeks before his death. It's been said that he confided in his friend that day that he hoped maybe one day, one of his students would come down off this hill and run his company for him. We're happy to say that's happened about a dozen times now. We've had presidents of the chocolate company, the entertainment corporation. The past 3 presidents of the school have all been Milton Hershey School graduates. We get to the end of the building, look out across the valley to your right. Beyond that short black fence, you'll see more student homes. That's the North Campus. There's 64 homes out there. That's where the 5th to 8th graders reside. Now, what kind of view we got up here today? The large dome building to your right is the Giant Center. That's the home of a Hershey Bears hockey team. They've been a member of the American Hockey League for 87 years. They're the winningest team in the league, and they're the developmental team of the Washington Capitals of the NHL. But that's also our indoor concert venue. There's always something going on in there year-round. Beyond the Hershey plant, the tall white building we saw, Med Center looks great out there at the base of the hill, but that tall building to the left is the new Children's Hospital. And the medical and research facilities of just this Penn State campus alone now includes buildings all along the base of the hill for over a half a mile to the left. And it continues to grow. Between the Children's Hospital and us, nestled in the trees, the short beige building, that's a Reese's plant. We saw that too. Chocolate World's down there at the bottom of this big hill. Do I got time for a story? Stadium has football fields. Local high school teams still use, but there's our summer concert venue set up for the summer. Big concerts here. Dome building beyond it, well, it's the original ice hockey arena. Ice Capade started there in the 1930s, but if you're a fan of professional basketball, March of 1962 in that arena is where Wilt Chamberlain scored his very famous 100-point game.